Josh, your host, Great Duck Customs, and today we are doing something a little bit off the map compared to the composite stuff. Today we are doing some resin casting, and I'm going to pop a part out so you guys can see what it ends up like, and then I'll show you how to resin cast, what I use for tools, and hopefully you guys can learn how to recreate some cool stuff. So I've got a few different molds here that we're working with. These are silicone blocks that I have made the pattern in, and then they are shaped. These are Hot Wheels die cast molds, but you can do this in anything from, trinkets, design art, jewelry, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Furniture, accessories, anything can be made with a silicone mold. And so this particular mold is making little streamliners. They look like this. Pretty good detail is what we're getting out of these things. You can see even the exhaust manifolds are coming through, so the silicone picks up all the detail. Pretty sharp little casting. And then I have another mold set here, and this is what we're going to be demolding and doing the casting on. These are street rod bodies, or I call it Project Hondarod. So this is a little die cast of my full-size hot rod. And I have an interior kit as well. So these have little fancy bucket seats in them, like so. And when they go together, they look something like that. Just two parts, very, very simple, very easy. So like I said, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to demold the ones that are currently in the mold box here. And then I'll show you guys what to use. I've got some resin, I've got some mixed cups, and this is not too bad. So I already started pulling the Hondarod body mold off. So on these I have very, very thick pour channels. So for you guys getting into molding and casting and stuff like that, you got to think of this in terms of fluid motion, right? So when you pour something into a cavity, you need it to have an air vent to go out. So I typically start pouring down one side that fills the mold cavity, and then any extra will bleed up on those air releases. It's very, very, very critical that you plan in the air release. Otherwise, your resin is not going to fill up the mold cavity. Yeah, we're crushing it. We are crushing it. So when I demold these, let me get the camera a little bit closer here. There we go. When I demold these, I try to typically rock it back and forth in the mold and see what I can release on its own. Sometimes it'll pop out, especially if it's kind of a fresh resin cast. These ones I poured probably about an hour ago. So there is going to be just a little bit of hesitation here. Come on. Anything that's a little bit too stuck, you can grab a small little plastic wedge. And you can use that to kind of help pry your part out of the mold just a little bit. But it will come out. Just like so. There we go. Hondarod body out. How you guys doing in the chat? There's our body cavity. So yeah, we've got a top side, a bottom side, and we have ourselves a nice little resin cast. So this one is the interior bits. And same kind of principle applies here. I've got a pour channel on one side and a vent hole on the other side that will fill up. So plan that out when you're doing your mold setup. Again, we're just going to take our plastic wedge and help get the resin casting out. These are little headlights. I've got a little miniature steering wheel in there. The silicone picks up all the detail. And then I did something kind of fancy on this one. I'll show you guys in just a second here when it demolds. be a little careful with your delicate parts when you're prying them up so you don't break them too bad. It is resin cast, so you can just silicone stuff or super glue stuff back together. But we try not to do that if we don't have to. Again, we're just going to crank on that silicone a little bit, flex it around, see if we can get some of that plastic to release on its own. And then we'll just start lightly prying up. And we'll get there. So check this one out. This one's going to be cool. This one has a red interior set. Pretty fancy, huh? Pretty cool. So with this, I ended up doing a first pour with the red casting resin, and I came back and poured the chassis right after it. So there's about a 20-minute open window that you can pour colors on top of themselves. And once it cures out, you're good to go. So with this particular resin cast, I have to pour these seats first because otherwise it's just too much of a void. When the resin's actually filling up in here, it doesn't quite get all the way back into that seat cavity. So what I do is I mix up just a little bit of resin, and I pre-pour those, and then I pour the whole chassis after that. And that's what we are going to do right now. So what I use on this is a 2-part casting resin. Get all the resin flash off these molds really quick here before we start pouring them. These typically you can just blow off with air, or just hit them with a plastic scraper tool. Comes off real quick. There we go. So I've got a 2-part resin casting system here. I get this from a place locally called Sterling Supply. They have all sorts of different silicones. They have all kinds of different casting resins. They have all sorts of floor coatings. So if you're doing like concrete floor pours, you can use some of the products for that too. With this stuff, it is a 1-to-1 mixed ratio. So you want 1 part of A and 1 part of B. I'm just going to mix a little tiny bit in here because this first pour is going to be just the seats. Let me see if I can zoom in on that just a little bit. There we go. For a mixing stick, I just use a piece of balsa wood. Very, very, very basic. Should I tint this? Should I tint this? Yeah, why not? Let's do another red tint. So I've just got some Alumilite red casting tint compound here. We put this in the A side. And what I'm going to do is pour my A side into the red cup because I do not want to contaminate everything with red. And then I'm just going to put just a little bit of a squeeze in there. Doesn't have to be a lot. And we'll mix that up real quick here. Like so. It's a pretty dark red already. I'm going to pour my B in. And this has about a 2-minute open window. So you got to go pretty quick with this resin system. They do have a bunch of different times that you can get. So there's a 5 to 7 minute ratio. There's a 30 to 40 minute ratio. So depending on how big of resin cast you're doing is kind of what you want to measure it off of. And so for this, I'm literally going to drip this into the seat cavity area. I don't need to go completely crazy here. Just need to fill up that seat area real quick there. All it takes is a few drips, but when I do mix this resin up, I tend to mix this up so you've got some extra. I'm just going to wipe off that excess real quick here. It doesn't really matter that we have a little extra. That's not a big deal. If you do want to wipe it off, you can. It's not critical for what we're doing. Who cares? We all care. There we go. Okay, so this red is going to get poured into another cup there. So now this seat interior is kind of setting. I'm going to let that set for probably about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just so we can get that cured out enough so when we pour our backside, it's actually going to bond still. We don't want to wait for it to cure too long, but we do want to make sure it's cured out so when we go to clamp our molds together, it does what we want it to do. So we're going to go to the mold setup now. On the body, what I like to do is run some packing tape around the pattern here so it stays together. This is just regular clear standard duty packing tape. Keep in mind that it's not really going to stick to the silicone, so you're going to have to kind of hold it together as you wrap it. The one beautiful thing about silicone is nothing sticks to it. And I do have a fancy tool that I'll show you guys in just a second here. For doing resin casting, it's almost necessary. I don't like to tell people to buy stuff they don't need to buy when it comes to tools and equipment. But the one thing that I have found that really made a big difference on the quality of resin castings that I'm doing. There we go. That is all set to rock and roll there. The one thing that I really found big time improvement is to get yourself a 5-gallon pressure pot. This has a lid that goes on it like so. Clampy clamps, you put some air in here, you fill it up until it hits about 35-40 psi, and putting your resin cast inside a pressure chamber is going to make sure that you don't have little pinholes in the surface. I know it seems a little excessive for doing Hot Wheels and die casts and stuff like that, but a pressure tank is very critical. The only kicker is that when you're using the 2 to 3 minute casting resin like we're using here, you really have to go. You really have to move. And so that means that you have to fill your molds and get them in the pressure chamber and get that under pressure before it starts to go off. And that can be easier said than done sometimes, depending on the size of your part. So with this next go, I'm going to fill up about 2/3 of the cup here. That's about 3/4 of an ounce, if you guys are keeping track. Equal parts A, equal parts B. And let's take a look at this. What I'm looking for is to make sure that this doesn't run. You know, the seat cavity that we already pre-poured, I want to make sure that that is cured along enough where it's not running and it's not going to drip. I think we got a couple more minutes to go on that. So yeah, typically when I do my silicone pours, around the mold cavity, I will pressure cast my silicone as well. Um, in order to do that, you really have to make sure that you test your pressure chamber to make sure that it doesn't leak, because that will definitely cause a problem with your silicone molds. But if you pressure cast your silicone molds and you pressure cast your resin parts, you will make some very, very, very nice parts. And like I said, we're going to go back to these interior sets. I mean, you can see just the amount of detail that you can get out of those resin casts as long as you're pressure coated. So there's no air bubbles, there's no pinholes, there's nothing like that. That's a really nice resin cast. So yeah, get yourself a pressure chamber. Huge, huge, huge investment for the shop in terms of making nice quality resin cast. And you know, with resin casts that look like that, even in 1/64 size, that is the ticket. So, like I said, even with our streamliner projects, you can see all those little teeny tiny exhaust pipes. I mean, even those things are turning out really, really good. And you would not get that by just regular doing an open cast without a pressure chamber. So invest in a pressure chamber. I think I got that one for like $200. It was on one of the Amazon websites or eBay or something like that. I can't remember. It's been a number of years, but it wasn't a lot of money. It was enough money where it was a good investment. So I don't know how much you're gonna be able to see this red resin cast, but it's kind of starting to change colors in the middle there. That means it's starting to cure out a little bit. You can see it starting to solidify just a little bit. And that's what we're looking for. So now I can take my secondary mold face here, and I am going to do the same thing I did with the body mold. I'm going to run a little bit of tape around the silicone mold. Maybe. we're trying to find a line here. Come on. Go. And again, throwing the tape around here is going to really guarantee that your part doesn't leak all over the place during the pressure casting. Which is important. Some people use rubber binders. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I just prefer packing tape myself. 6 one, half a dozen the other. There are no wrong or right ways to do this stuff. Whatever you're most comfortable with is fine. Okay. So I've got 2 pressure chambers there, or two silicone molds ready to rock and roll there. I do need to get my pressure chamber ready because we are going to literally go straight from mixing right into that pressure chamber. There's my part A. There's my part B, and the clock is officially started. You really, really need to start moving quick here. You do not need to mix that long. You only need to mix for about 5 seconds, 10 seconds max. It's very, very, very low viscosity stuff. So I typically like to start pouring in the more complex mold cavity first. And I'll give a little bit of a squeeze just to kind of help some of those bigger air bubbles out. And we're going to come over here and start pouring it in the body shape. Obviously, the bigger the pour channels that you have and the bigger the air release channels that you have, will get the resin out quicker. I've still got some air in this one, so I'm just going to keep forcing that by hand. I'm definitely on a time schedule, so keep that in mind where you don't want to mess around too much. Okay. That's good to go there. We're going to grab these two mold cavities. They're going straight into our pressure chamber there. Lid goes on, like so. Keep in mind that this is going to be basically a bomb. So you want to make sure that the lid is really, really clamped on nice and tight. You want to make sure that that's not going to go blowing off on you. That looks really good. And then we're going to get some air. There we go. And we are in the pressure chamber. The only thing left to do is wait for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And then we pop them out, just like we did when I started the video. And to give you guys an idea, that's how close I got in terms of getting that in there. It's just now starting to go off a little bit. Just now starting to go off. So yeah, 2 to 3 minutes is all you get for work time, guys. 2 to 3 minutes tops. But yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, we did our demold on our first one, got the second one poured. That's all I wanted to show you guys today. Little tricks of the trade, little how-to in the shop. So yeah, keep rocking, keep rolling. I'm gonna hop off live here and I will show you guys some updates once we're done casting a few more of these. I will catch you guys all later. Have a good one.